Do you ever worry that you're not a real artist because you didn't go to art school? Or that maybe you've hurt your chances at a creative career by trying to learn on your own? Well, I've been a professional artist for over a decade, and I'm self-taught. And now I help artists turn their hobby into illustration careers. So in this video, I'm going to show you a 90-day plan for mastering all the skills that you actually need and how even beginners can make money from their art. Also, I'm going to show you how to avoid the traps that keep artists stuck. So I made a free study guide so that you can follow along. It's free, it's downloadable right below. So there's 3 overarching areas of focus that really move the needle, and each is filled with sub-skills. Week 1, when you first start learning illustration, it can feel absolutely overwhelming. There is color theory and perspective and anatomy and composition. Everywhere you look, there's another must-know skill, and it's like you're drowning in information. You don't know where to focus, and every new tutorial just adds to the pile. But here's the thing, before you need any of that, you need to get comfortable with your actual tools. Whether it's Procreate, watercolors, acrylics, you have to start by learning how to use the tool in your hands. If you don't know how to open the drawing app and select a brush or create a canvas, none of those other skills really matter. You're just gonna get stuck. So for your first week, find a tutorial in the basics of your chosen medium. I've got a free tutorial on YouTube on how to use Procreate, and just focus on how that tool works. Okay, but once you've started getting comfortable with your tool, what should you focus on learning first? Your second week of study will be the most important skill to learn. This skill is like using a proper chef's knife. You can still chop with a butter knife or tear things apart by hand, but every step is going to be slower, messier, and more frustrating. With a chef's knife, everything you do will become faster, cleaner, and easier. So what's this chef's knife for artists? It's learning to draw what you see, whether it's an object in real life or a reference photo. If you want to draw from your imagination and create your own work, it's going to be a million times easier if you first learn to draw what you can actually see in front of you. But how do you do that? Okay, so there's 2 parts. First, there's eye-hand coordination. That's being able to draw a straight line or a circle when you want to. This skill is like tying your shoes or lifting a weight. It's very awkward at first, but you will get better at this with practice. The second part is to learn to see a little bit differently. In order to draw quickly without spending hours on every sketch, artists use shortcuts, these clever tricks that help you take what you see in real life and easily get it onto paper. These are called drawing techniques, and they are the secret sauce that makes drawing way easier. That's because they will help you see differently. Now, one of my favorite drawing techniques is the upside down drawing technique. You're gonna flip whatever you're trying to draw upside down and then sketch it. The reason this is so effective is because suddenly your brain stops thinking, oh, this is a face and an eye, or this is a rabbit, and it just sees simple lines and shapes which are way easier to draw. It's a game changer for beginners. So there are dozens of drawing techniques out there, but these are the methods that I've seen make the biggest difference in my students' ability to level up their drawing skills fast. And yes, all of these are listed in that free study guide below, so you don't have to write it all down. But a quick word of warning here. This is where a lot of beginners and even experienced artists hit a wall. They start thinking, if my drawings don't look exactly like the reference image, then I suck at this. But chasing perfection is a massive waste of time. I've seen students spend hours obsessing over every line only to end up frustrated or worse, give up altogether. If you find yourself in a perfectionist mindset, I want you to ask yourself this. Do you want to draw in a hyper-realistic style? Truthfully, most of my students don't even want to draw perfectly realistic images. The artists that they admire, their work is like really sketchy or wonky, it's full of life. They want their drawings to be fun, not photorealistic. After all, if we wanted perfect realism, we could just take a photo, right? Learning these drawing techniques makes creating your own art easier, but it does not mean that you need to master every individual drawing technique in order to make good art. In fact, most artists never do. The real secret is that they're taking bits and pieces that work from different techniques, different drawing techniques, and mixing them together into a way that works for their own brain. Maybe you love the looseness of one method, but another technique drives you crazy. Maybe another one helps you spot shapes and makes it easier to simplify your subject. Just combine the parts that work best for you. Your unique style is going to come from experimenting and picking what feels right and then leaving the rest behind. In your third week, it's time to move beyond just copying reference photos and start making art your own. We're diving into developing your style, the unique way that your art looks. Style is made up of all of your choices: color, texture, details, but the single most important choice to focus on first, shape. Why shape? Well, imagine decorating a room in your home. It's the architecture, the shape of the room, that determines where you add paint and where you hang decorations. For example, in this attic, the way that the walls shape, I wouldn't want to put my desk over here unless I wanted to hit my head on the ceiling. In your art, the shapes that you draw and how you arrange them are your architecture. They set the stage for every other decision: where you will put colors, where you will add details. So let's break down how you can start building your style with shapes. No fancy skills required. One way is to choose how to represent what you see. There are a few different ways to approach shape. You can either do shapes in a geometric way, an organic way, or stylized somewhere in between those. Geometric shapes are circles, cubes, triangles, cones, stuff like that. Geometric shapes are often associated with man-made feelings because they kind of feel artificial. Most things in nature are not perfectly geometric. Organic shapes are more fluid. They aren't precise or exact in the way that like a perfect circle or a perfect square is. So for example, I have drawn these mushrooms in a very geometric style. So you can see that like everything about this mushroom is geometric. The mushroom top itself is made up of a half circle. Even these cuts in the edges are very triangular. They're very straight and perfect. Even the shading is very geometric. So this is an example of very geometric style of drawing. Whereas this mushroom is a lot more natural looking. The edges here are not perfectly precise. The shading is rough around the edges. There's even like not like super clean lines. It's very much more fluid. It's much more natural. Maybe some people would say realistic. Now, geometric versus organic shapes is just one concept that I teach my students. So in week 4, we finally get to my favorite subject matter, color. Now, if you've ever felt overwhelmed picking colors or frustrated when that perfect palette that you found falls flat on your art, you're not alone. See, most people think that picking the right colors is the secret, but there's actually a much bigger game changer, and it's called contrast. That's the secret sauce that makes your colors pop every single time. Let's look at these two limes. Why does the one on the left look better? Because the colors have more contrast. They're easier to tell apart. Getting contrast with a single color is super easy. You just make one part noticeably lighter and the other darker. That's why your sketches often look amazing in black and white. Those are the ultimate contrasting colors. Here's the catch. When you start mixing multiple colors, contrast gets complicated. For example, if you draw a yellow flower on a light pink background, even if I use a dark yellow, it can still be hard to see. Why? Because not all colors are created equal. Every color has its own natural brightness. If we look at these two color wheels with one having the color completely removed, what do you notice about the areas of purple versus the areas of yellow? Purple is way naturally darker than yellow. That's why our dark yellow was still way lighter than a light pink. This can be really difficult to spot at the beginning. So here's a favorite shortcut that I like to teach my students. So let's say that we've got this girl, and I can't quite put my finger on why this isn't working. Here's what we do. Create a new layer on top of your canvas, fill it with a black as you can get. Now I want you to go to the little N right here, which are your blending modes, and look for one called color. This is going to remove all the saturation, and we can instantly see that the shirt color and background color are too similar. From here, you have a choice. I could either make the background or her shirt brighter or darker so that I can tell them apart. In fact, I don't even have to change the colors. I can just eyedrop the shirt color, make it darker, drop that in. Now I'm going to turn that black layer back on, and boom. Yeah, you can totally see this is much easier to see. But what if you've picked great colors and your art still feels a little flat or not just as polished as you would like? Here's the next step to take your art to the next level: learning where and how to add the right details. This is how you really start to refine your style and make your drawings stand out. Now here's the thing. So professional artists don't just sprinkle random details everywhere. The secret is in knowing what kind of details to add and where they matter the most. And the best way to do this is learning the basics of shading and rendering. Let's break it down. There's two types of shadows. When light hits an object, the part that's closest is in light and the part that's away from it is shadow. This first type of shadow is what makes the ball actually look round, and it's called a form shadow. But the ball itself also creates a shadow on the ground itself, and this is called the cast shadow. Let's look at an illustrated example of this in action. Looking for areas in your art that you can add these two types of shadows can really help you level up your art. So if we look at the girl's eye here, the highest point of a rounded eye will be in light. So if I add shadows on either side of here, this creates the form shadow, which helps make her eye look round. Okay, that's the form shadow. But also her eyelashes and eyelid are actually casting a shadow on the eyeball itself. So I can add a cast shadow under here. And the cast shadow really can make it look even cooler. Other topics this week you can go into is how to blend and layer your shadows without everything turning into a mushy gray, how to invent shadows from your imagination, and what colors to use for your shadows. Weeks 6 and 7. Once you've got those core skills down and you've started to develop your style, it's time for the next big leap, drawing from your imagination. This is where experienced artists shine. They can picture an idea in their head and put it on the page. What's their secret? Perspective. Okay, for example, I drew this honey bear without any reference. I just thought about the bottle in my kitchen and pictured the shapes. A circle for the face, another for the muzzle, a cylinder for the spout. Because I've practiced drawing cylinders and basic shapes, it was easy to piece this all together from memory. So there's a couple of things that perspective really helps with, and that is getting accurate proportions and scale in our drawings, as well as foreshortening. So foreshortening is like, I've got this pencil and it's straight up and down when it's parallel to the camera, but as I tilt it towards the camera, it gets shorter. But this isn't like random how this works. There's actually some rules for how foreshortening works, and that's what perspective teaches us. Perspective also helps with getting our proportions accurate. So our brain knows that the size of these train cars are all the same. But actually, check this out. The cars in the front are really big, but the ones in the back, they're actually very, very tiny. Of course, it's obvious when you say it that things that are further away are smaller than things that are close up. Like, we know that this hand is not larger than this woman. The hand is just closer to us. But when you're trying to draw these things, it can be tricky because your brain says, I know that the train cars are the same size, so I've got to make them relatively the same size. And so you're fighting with your brain saying, well, I know this thing is smaller because it's further away, but also I know it's the same size. So when you learn to draw in perspective, you start to internalize some of these rules about drawing. And then when you go to draw from your imagination, the rules about the way things look and the way that you actually draw them to look that way, they get kind of baked into your brain. Even if you don't have a reference, you know the way that something is supposed to look because you've learned the rules of perspective. And once you know the rules, it's really fun to break them and bend them and play with things to make them look a little bit more funky or exaggerated. But if you don't know the rules, your attempts, they just might not work as well. So know the rules to break the rules, right? Week 8. So far, we've covered how to make art. In the next few weeks, you're going to start working on a set of skills that you need not to just make good art, but art that sells. And the first step is learning about the different ways you can make money from your art. Because this is where a lot of people get stuck with a business that doesn't actually suit them well. See, there is a lot of different ways to make money from your art, but not all of them are common knowledge. You may have seen artists on social media selling stickers or taking commissions and think that that's the most popular and most common way to make money from your art. But that's only because you have been exposed to that way of making art. That way of making money from your art means that you need to be on social media, posting and sharing what you're doing. It's part of that business model to be successful. And if you hate making social media content, then that way of making art is not going to be a good fit for you. Look, there are a lot of great opportunities out there that just are not represented well on social media because those artists don't need to be on social media to sell their art. For example, I used to work at a fashion company, drawing flowers and tropical patterns. I didn't get that job because I had a big social media following. I interviewed for the job and they liked my portfolio of work. There was no reason for me to be sharing about what I was doing on social media. I'm not even sure if I would have been allowed to share anything until the collections were released. So this week, you'll want to spend some time researching the different work available to artists. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it's a great place to start. And again, it's in the study guide. There's things like editorial, textile and home decor, stationery and greeting cards, fashion and apparel, video games, TV, animation, advertising and packaging. Then there's children's books and publishing of even adult books. Week 9. Here's a mistake a lot of new artists make. They pick a piece that they're proud of and they try to sell it, only to hear crickets. Why? Because what you love making isn't always what people in that market actually want to buy. If you want to actually sell your art, you're going to want to do a little detective work first. That means studying the market that you want to break into, whether it's children's books, greeting cards, surface design, or anything else. Pay attention to what's already selling in that market. For example, if you want to make art for greeting cards, check out the cards in an actual store or look at the top sellers on Etsy. You're going to notice that there's a big difference between the kinds of colors and themes that you would want when buying a card for someone's birthday versus buying a card for someone whose pet or grandparent has passed away. Birthday cards are going to be more colorful and bright and cheerful. Sympathy cards are going to be softer colors and gentler imagery. Artists who are able to sell their art aren't just making art they like, they're making art that fits what buyers are looking for. And the real magic happens when you're able to find that overlap of what you like making and what other people like to buy. Week 10 and 11. Once you've done the research on the market that you'd like to break into, you're going to spend the next couple weeks creating 3 to 5 pieces that would work really well for that market. And in week 12, it's time to share your work with potential buyers. Marketing can feel scary and yucky. Maybe you feel like you're bothering people, but really, it's just about sharing your work. Think about the last time that you were sitting next to an artist working in their sketchbook. Wouldn't you have enjoyed going through their sketchbook? Art is fun to look at. And look, you are providing a service. You are there to help people. Companies need fun art to sell their products. You're not trying to sell artwork to people who do not want or do not even buy artwork, right? But how do you find those clients? Well, let's go back to our example of greeting cards. When you go into a store, you turn over the back of the card, you'll usually find the name of the publisher of that card. And if you visit their website, they'll often have an artist's submission guide or an email where you can share your work with them. Boom. So to recap, first, you want to learn how to actually use your art medium, your tool of choice. Second, you need to learn how to actually make good art. Learn how to draw, create colors that look good together, add interesting details, and develop your unique style. And then third, you want to learn different methods of making money from your art and create a small portfolio of work that fits that method of making money, and then share that work with the people who would buy that kind of art. And while these things can feel scary at first, it can be broken down into simple steps. In fact, it's exactly how I built my program, the Illustrators Launchpad. So if that sounds like it might be helpful for you, you can check it out via the link in the description. And if you ever feel like your imagination is stronger than your drawing skills, then check out this video next to learn my tricks for transforming your imagination into real drawings, the simple formula to create irresistibly cute artwork, and how to break free from copying tutorials and finally create your own work.